Before the United States entered the Second World War, Roosevelt learned that Hitler was advancing his desires for an atomic device that would greatly magnify armaments of destruction by a huge degree. Not wanting Hitler to realize his goal, Roosevelt got his OSS chief Bill Donovan to covertly obtain hundreds of bags of mine diggings from the African continent that held the mineral of choice for the same goal in the United States. That mineral being uraninite, an ore that contains the right ingredients that when heated creates a great amount of gas, primarily of helium, that makes the ore so important to the production of uranium. This is all prologue. The next part of the story tells what happened with the ore. Roosevelt called his secret operation the Manhattan Project. So secret, in fact, the Vice President, Harry Truman, in those days, had no idea it existed, nor did he learn about it until he became the President of the United States. Roosevelt learned that the Manhattan Project was successful in the latter part of 1943, splitting the atom. Controlling and maintaining the splitting consumed the remainder of 1943, along with designing and testing the case for delivery. When Truman became president, General Leslie Groves, the head of the unit to create the uranium, as well as the Tennessee Valley Authority, which was unknown in those days, told President Truman about the bomb for the first time. And we all know what happened shortly after Truman digested that news. In today's vernacular, the first generation bombs were very dirty, as well as all the testing done in New Mexico prior to dropping them on Japan. Now begins the epilogue and my part of the story. After the bombs decimated Japan into surrender, Truman set in motion a commission, the Atomic Energy Commission to be exact, to find out exactly what we had really unleashed. Shortly after the tests began, in 1949, the AEC in Washington, D.C., Los Alamos, and Sandia Laboratories of New Mexico formed the nucleus of the official testing unit of all atomic devices existing or proposed. Testing began in 1950 at Nellis Air Force Base in western Nevada in their humongous armament testing area on base, and it officially became and still is known as the Nevada Testing Site, or NTS. When the testing had started, some tests required an airdrop, which only the Air Force could provide. And they provided it with proficiency gained from the previous 6 years over Japan. The Navy Department, not being happy about the Air Force's favor with congressional budgeting over their bomb delivery, wanted an airplane designed that could not only deploy an atomic device anywhere in the world, but also by doing it on and off a carrier. That plane, a North American Aviation AJ-1 Savage, was produced. It contained all the bells and whistles necessary to carry out that period of time, a device the size and characteristics of the Fat Man and Little Boy bombs. I'm going to show you a portion of this aircraft which was changed in a few minutes, and the reason for the change. This AJ-1 was delivered to Composite Squadron 5, or VC-5, at the Naval Air Station, Patuxent River, Maryland, for shakedown and carrier qualification. Not too long after its arrival, it proved impractical for VC-5 to provide the necessary appraisal that the Navy Department so quickly needed. Hence, VC-6 was formed for that sole purpose. Composite 6, or VC-6, was created in 1951. The squadron not only provided the proof the Navy needed, but filled the actual requirement for supplying the service. Later in 1952, I received orders to report to VC-6 at Naval Air Station North Island, San Diego, California, as an electronic technician, radio man, AT-3. After a few months OJT, I volunteered to become a third man on a three-man crew. In the spring of 1953, I joined with Lieutenant Edward A. Decker, the driver or pilot, and Lieutenant J.G. Jerry Dorn, BN, Bombardier Navigator, and me, the IFR operator, or in-flight refueler operator, and the bomb's trigger installer. When the bomb wasn't in the bay, a very large gas tank was. At this time, our team was introduced to NAN Fox 8, a much updated version, AJ, that became the AJ-2, which was greatly improved over the original design. The original design had that dihedral in the stabilizer, the rudder and the horizontal stability devices that I showed you in the other picture. Wrong button. This one has the horizontal, and that is the horizontal stabilizer that it's on, but it has no dihedral in the horizontal stabilizer. The AJ-1 was a little maker. The AJ-2 had a much greater safety factor. In January of 1955, the Atomic Energy Commission invited my squadron to a party, a tea party, was to be held at the Nevada testing site, and the bomb test series was called Teapot. In the time period this test series was made, navigation by aircraft was not done by chance, but with lots of help and from a lot of different sources. There are ground-based VOR sites, which is a VHF radio transmitter that provides azimuth information 360 degrees. And at these sites are also what they call NSME transmitters that provide distance information. This info is given to lay the groundwork for describing my squadron, VC6's Camp Swampy, which became operational in Death Valley. To comply with our invitation to party, our planes were to fly from NAS North Island, California, to the drop zone, a distance of about 325 miles, and return to North Island. Tests were conducted at all times of the day and night. Daylight navigation, aircraft-wise, is not as nerve-wracking as night because you can get some visuals to confirm your location. But nothing can compare to a radio nav aid for more accuracy. However, there were no CAA, today that would be FAA, nav aid sites in the path to the test. The closest CAA nav aid equipment to the test was located at Tonopah, Nevada, roughly 95 miles away from the site and 400 plus miles from North Island. So far, so good. The 400 plus miles involved going to Tonopah were not a problem. The trouble came from Tonopah to the site. At the testing site, timing of the test was paramount at all times. Keep that in mind, please. The Navy, never stymied for solutions, came up with the satisfactory conclusion that providing its own nav aid facility would be the answer. Technicians from the squadron with the necessary equipment drove through Death Valley to establish the navigational and camp equipment site. Not only were the nav aids made available, but included were accommodations for the inhabitants who were also to operate the systems. Navy know-how, problem solved. 12 miles from the junction of highways 374 and 95 in Nevada, at a specific site called Beatty, Nevada, and off the road 50 feet, you would have found the squadron's Federal Navigation Facility, U.S. Navy style. Welcome to VC6 Camp Swampy. What is the Navy camp doing in the desert? Well, we'll tell you. It contained not only radio communications, which also provided a radio homing beacon, but also a visual night beacon of high wattage lamps capable of thousands of watts of brilliant white light. Following are the features and descriptions of the nav aid. It had somewhere the following equipment: one truck, 5x8 stake bed 6-wheeler USN, 10 5-gallon jerry cans, gasoline, USN. 1 10 kilowatt, 110 volt AC, 240 volt AC, 24 volt DC, Westinghouse generator, USN. 1 wood stove heating / cooking, USN. 3 bags sleeping, USN. And 15 dozen MRIs, USMC. 1 helium tank full, USN, and that was to raise the antenna wire attached to a weather balloon. The balloon was up most of the time. The generator furnished lighting for the camp, power for the radio equipment, transceiver and homing signals, and power for the location lamps. When a mission was on, the info was passed from North Island to the camp via low-frequency ART-13 at regular check-ins. The camp would light up, if dark, and start transmitting the homing signal. Temperatures during the day were high 90s or 3 digits. Uniform for the day was skivvies and maybe a t-shirt. Sleeping attire consisted of the uniform of the day, plus a shirt, plus trousers, and plus socks. At night, the drinking water froze. If the mission was called off, Liberty was available for all except 1 person, and they had to stand the watch. However, with only 2, maybe 3 present at any given time, well, Nevada was the closest, or Beatty, Nevada was the closest town with 1 general store, Slim's Place for saloon and food, and several other houses. Even in Death Valley, in the middle of nothing, when a vehicle, any vehicle, passes by only 50 feet away, you sound general quarters. Well, 2 vehicles drove by, passed the camp, stopped, backed up, and everyone got out. That was the day we were invaded. We were informed that they were from a San Diego Sunday newspaper heading to Nevada looking into a story for the next Sunday's edition. Well, to a newsman, seeing a gorgeous Navy installation such as ours in the proximity of Death Valley knew something good was going to make their day. The pictures you're looking at shows the newsies filming the heating MRIs we were preparing for a meal. And we told them that we used the method of pouring water from a canteen around the can's perimeter to activate the carbide modules in and around the can to a very terrific heat, which in fact did cook the meals inside the can. Well, their story and our pictures probably made the Sunday news that week, and I'll bet if we were in it that we were next to the comic section. Members from the squadron rotated through the camp at 2 weeks interval, from January through May of 1955. I spent my 2 weeks in March at the camp and 1 day in April flying over ground zero. Now you get to hear the rest of the story. Now I'm not here to entertain. Now I'm here to get serious. 0830, squadron ready suited up for morning briefing and flying. It was April 15, 1955. Nan Fox 8 was going to Nevada. Lieutenant J.G. Dorn and I didn't know the mission. Lieutenant Decker did. He wasn't talking, at least about what, where, when, and why. The flight to Camp Swampy was uneventful. Turning to 090 degrees over Camp Swampy, heading towards the test site, we were told about the activity expected at that time. Operation. Proceed to NTS to arrive by 11:30 hours, the dangerous 36,000, to await test MET, M-E-T, countdown. Do not watch detonation. Circle ground zero counterclockwise 15-mile radius. When cloud passes altitude plus 10 seconds, turn into STEM and enter. Exit and return NAS North Island direct. Let me digress for just a moment. The series of the tests which were conducted in April were also part of the tests which began in January. They were the Teapot series, which was number 15 in a series of tests which began in 1950 and did not end until 62 officially. Operation MET was designated that in nomenclature specifically because it contained men and equipment. Somehow, during the test. I add that because it explains what is to come. Well, my seat in the aircraft faced aft and behind pilot on the port side, which is the left side facing the front of the aircraft. And the bombardier navigator seat faced forward and just a little bit behind the pilot. That's the position of the three seats in the aircraft office or cockpit. I could look out my seat and watch the ground go by. Well, at this particular time, all eyes were inside the cockpit when the countdown began in our headsets. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, detonation. Several seconds later, the plane shook, my body sunk a little deeper in my seat, and then I looked. What I saw will remain in memory until I die. That round cloud, roughly the size from my perspective of a soccer ball, dirt-colored, covered with little patches about 2 inches square in size, filled with exploding lightning flashes, were every color of the rainbow. Yes, I said they were because that cloud was alive. It was the most beautiful, awesome, mesmerizing vision I have ever witnessed in my life, and the second coming is going to be a lot greater than that. Well, a comment escaped my lips, and Ed looked down too. Not to be left out, the bombardier, surprise, came over and looked between us and added some comments of his own. The cloud was still below us, and from our view, not moving too fast, but it still caused all of us to express comments, essentially saying, "Let's get the hell out of Dodge." We did a 270-degree turn, headed for home, and a little over an hour later, left Nan Fox 8 for a shower and departed the base, saying nothing to each other or anyone else after leaving NTS behind. The next day, I expected to hear from the CO about the episode. Nothing. Saw dear Jerry Dorn later, asked if anything was said. Nothing. Jerry did say Ed was up boring holes for somebody, and that was all that ever occurred. Maybe others felt it was a bit screwy too. Remember, we defied an order, all three of us. Seeing the bomb firsthand, attending many schools about how to do my job with atomic bombs, has given me a very strong opinion about their destructive nature. I have searched out every source of information I can get, even during the years of sworn silence. When I tell you what has happened to you already, you will not believe me. And when I said sworn silence, I meant just that. I had the orders given to me when I started in this squadron that if I ever said anything, whether I knew it to be true or heard it, or saw anything that pertained to anything in the nature of an atomic device of any kind or its effects, I would either be incarcerated for life at Leavenworth, or I would mysteriously disappear. And believe me, in 1950s, anything that pertained to this kind of information, especially from people who had the authority to dispense it, believed it. And it was only because of the passage of the Freedom of Information Act that I was ever released from that oath that I took. And believe me, it's been difficult all these years to maintain my silence. And even my wife of 59 years didn't know about it until after that Information Act was enacted. Was anything said? I have handouts with URLs on them for people who wish to explore this avenue further. Now let me tell you why I said that this has already happened to you. If you were in Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, or New York State, particularly the city of Troy, New York, in particular, at any time in the 1950s, dependent only on the whim of the wind, you have been affected by fallout from the testing in Nevada during the 1950s. I can't give you the names of the states, that were affected by the fallout from the testing that was done in New Mexico. But believe me, the winds have blown through those southern states as well as the northern states, and those people in the early parts of the 50s and latter parts of the 40s, particularly around 1943, were affected by fallout. I've said you've been affected by fallout. The only question remains is by how much. One of the perils of atomic radiation is a rather erratic operating thyroid. It can evidence all kinds of problems, including cancer. And it takes years for these things to become manifest in the human body. Keep that in mind. During the NTS testing, this was in the 50s, only the immediate dosages were considered, which allowed 3.9 rads to more than 20 rads to be considered in the safe zone. Today, we know that is not true. Even time exposure was factored into the equation, but we know now there's another factor to assess: cumulative. My cancer was surgically removed in June 16, 1996. And I've been captive to thyroid medication daily since 1970 and will until I die. Now let me give you another surprise. Maybe. The scientists from Los Alamos and Sandia knew about this added assessment. The DOD, AEC, and the test managers were directed to either alter or destroy some reports so as, quote, to not alarm the populace, end quote. The people of the United States were purposely kept in the dark about one of the most heinous operations ever foisted on them. Government officials used the Cold War for the obfuscation. Since the Freedom of Information Act was released me from the threat of imprisonment, even death, I've been on a crusade about this period of history. I want to tell the whole United States citizenry that the soil under the U.S. and its U.S. territories in the South Pacific have received the threat and delivery of the atomic and hydrogen bombs in the past years of more than 500 devices. It seems that no one cares but me, and now maybe thee. If the radiance of 1,000 suns were to burst at once into the sky, that would be like the splendor of the Mighty One. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. Those were the words of J. Robert Oppenheimer in 1945, after the Trinity atom bomb test at White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico, the first ever nuclear test.